Very good afternoon and many thanks for joining us at this time. You're watching News Analysis live on Politics and Business TV. The top stories. President Bola Tinubu stresses the need for collaboration and inclusiveness in achieving global food security. Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria says petrol scarcity will take at least 2 weeks to normalize. All Progressives Congress and the Labour Party gives a nod to the proposed bill seeking to stop politicians guilty of tax evasion from running for elective offices in the country. Details coming up shortly. Welcome back. I am Momo Ifepi Sosemere. President Bola Tinubu has said collaboration and inclusiveness are key to achieving global food security, addressing collective challenges and driving innovation across a chain of interest for a more stable world. Tinubu stated this during a high-level panel session at the World Economic Forum, a special meeting on global collaboration, growth and energy for development in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, stressed that collaboration and inclusiveness, especially with regards to Africa, are key to building a future of hope, peace and progress. According to him, capital mobilization, which is needed to spur economic growth and associated advancement in Africa, cannot be overlooked any longer, noting that the continent is richly endowed, but the diversity of its resources must reflect in its wherewithal and economic realities. The president further called on global leaders to pay attention to the development in the Sahel, emphasizing the need for an understanding of the vectors of the current situation while suggesting collaboration in the pursuit of enduring solutions. Now, the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Senator Atiku Bagudu, has stressed the need to capture the yearnings and aspirations of senior citizens in the National Development Plan at a one-day capacity enhancement workshop for state commissioners and directors of social welfare on the Domestication of National Senior Citizens Center, NSCC, Act and National Action Plan on Aging in Abuja. Bagudu assured stakeholders of a determination to work with NSCC to come up with accurate and acceptable document that would provide a guide to ensure proper capturing of senior citizens into the National Development Plan. According to media reports, the minister had at the workshop, which was organized by the NSCC in collaboration with the United Nations Fund for Population Activities, UNFPA, assured the participants that the renewed hope agenda of President Bola Tinubu's administration had passion for the welfare and well-being of senior citizens in the country. This is as the Permanent Secretary, Federal Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Abel Eniton, disclosed that Nigeria is projected to accommodate 30 million older persons by the 2050, thereby stressing the need to plan properly to arrest the situation. Former Governor of Benue State, Gabriel Suswam, has tongue-lashed President Bola Tinubu-led administration for its inability to change Nigeria's economic fortunes. Media report quotes the Benue lawmaker as saying that the Tinubu-led government cannot take the country out of the economic misfortune inflicted by his predecessor, Muhammadu Buhari, further lamenting that the removal of petrol subsidy, floating of the naira, increase in electricity tariff, among other policies, is evident that the government is out to make things worse for the masses. On the leadership crisis in the People's Democratic Party, Suswam said it has what is needed to take the party back to its glorious days. According to him, the PDP remains the party to take Nigeria out of the current economic situation. Well, welcome back from that break. You're watching News Analysis live on Politics and Business TV. Now, the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, IPMAN, says the petrol scarcity is currently spreading to more states across the country. Will take at least 2 weeks to normalize. This comes as the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, insisted that it has adequate stock of the product. However, the Public Relations Officer Chiniduman Adike said the product is not available in the country as it has become a bit of a challenge to source the product because most refineries in Europe are undergoing a turnaround and maintenance. Ukadike also blamed the acute shortage in supply on importation bottlenecks and the slow pace of marketers' license renewal by the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, NNDPRA. They disclosed that only 1,050 marketers out of 15,000 have had their licenses renewed by NNDPRA. Moving on now to other matters where the All Progressives Congress is being to present winner of the Ondo State governorship primary election, Governor Lucky Ayedatiwa, with his certificate of return today. This was disclosed by the party's Deputy National Organizing Secretary, Nze Duru. It is, however, unclear if the presentation will take place before, during, or after the meeting of the National Working Committee, which is reportedly built for today. This is against the backdrop of the party national chairman Abdullahi Ganduje, who had appealed to aggrieved aspirants who participated in the shadow poll to back the governor to have a united front ahead of the November 16th governorship poll. According to media reports, Ayedatiwa was declared the winner by Governor Usman Ododo-led primary election committee on Sunday after the poll conducted in all the 18 local government areas of the state. However, there are reports that the result was contested over allegations of irregularities and violence in some polling units. In the meantime, the All Progressives Congress and the Labour Party have thrown their weight behind the proposed bill seeking to stop politicians guilty of tax evasion from running for elective offices in the country. According to media reports, the endorsement comes in the wake of Friday's announcement by the chairman of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee, Taiwo Oyedele, while speaking at the 2024 Strategic Retreat for staff of the Joint Tax Board. Oyedele disclosed that an amendment to the existing tax law will also be forwarded to the National Tax Compliance and prevent default by the political class. Reacting, Deputy National Organizing Secretary of the All Progressives Congress, Nze Chididuru, welcomed the development, stating that it is one of the measures with which people can hold intending elective office holders accountable. He further stressed that tax evasion is a grievous crime in any country. The federal government has announced the unbundling of power distribution companies in Nigeria along state lines. This, according to media reports, is due to their large sizes, which often result in inefficiency and ineffectiveness. The Minister of Power, Adebayo Adelabu, who stated this when he received the Senate Committee on Power led by their chairman, Senator Eyinaya Abaribe, said the Tinubu-led administration had commenced the restructuring of Nigeria's 11 power distribution companies. According to him, the privatization of the firms would not be reversed, but stressed that the discos would be broken into more efficient structures. The Nigerian government has also ordered the sale of discos that have been taken over by banks and Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria from its original investors and owners. Right, the Nigerian government has ordered the sale of discos that have been taken over by banks and Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria from its original investors and owners, the likes of Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, AEDC, Benin Electricity Distribution Company, BEDC, Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company, KEDC, and Kano Electricity Distribution Company are all being managed by banks and AMCON. AEDC is reportedly under the management of UBA. Fidelity Bank manages BEDC, KEDC, and Kano Electricity Distribution Company. AMCON is in charge of the Ibadan Electricity Distribution Company. Meanwhile, governors of the 36 states of the Federation have agreed to work together to tackle epileptic power supply in the country. And as part of measures to achieve this objective, the governors have agreed to take steps to break the monopoly of discos and power distribution across states. Recall that in March 2023, then President Muhammadu Buhari signed into law the constitutional amendment allowing states in the country to license, generate, transmit, and distribute electricity. An energy consultant, Dr. Peter Piper, joins me now to critically analyze the issues bedeviling the power sector. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Right, so much here to talk about with a lot to take in. I mean, we can actually go over these issues over and over without, being able to reach a point of departure. But here we are talking about, the power sector. This seems to be the most talked about sector. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Because without power, nothing works.
Right. So, could you please, talk us through what it means to unbundle the power distribution companies in Nigeria as an energy consultant?
Yeah, unbundling simply means what it says. A bundle. You break it down. So what the government what this policy is giving the state government the opportunity to license independent power producers or power plants,
Right.
and given the responsibility of the generation and distribution of electricity to the executive state governors. So it has been unbundled. So electricity generation and distribution is no longer an exclusive task of the federal government. So that's technically what it means to unbundle the power distribution network.
Right, but when you take a look at states, take a look at the states across the country at the moment, there are states that are not even able, to, the revenue generation in some states is really so low or poor that it calls for concern. Now, tasking these states with this, responsibility of, generating and also distributing power, wouldn't that be too difficult or quite a hard nut, to crack?
Well, I'm an advocate of the private sector taking over this, the job of generating and distributing electricity. What the government should do is just give the enabling environment and give the policy. And that's what the federal government has already done by making this policy, giving the opportunity to the state governors to do something about it. Now, this is the best decision I think the Tinubu administration has ever taken. Every state has its own energy endowment. If you take Delta State, River State, Bayelsa State, for example, they have a lot of water there. So they can start thinking about micro hydro power station. They're also blessed with an abundance of oil and gas.
How about states like Borno?
Borno, they are blessed with the sun.
Okay.
So they can start thinking about establishment of solar farms and what they can do, because there's hardly any part of this country that is not blessed with enough sustainable energy. And when we talk about sustainability, we are most often thinking about renewable, energy
right.
and energy sources. That means explore the use of wind, explore solar, the sun, explore water, hydro, and of course, let's not forget that Nigeria's exports is crude oil. So we are rich in oil and gas. And I see no reason why we can't capitalize on this. When you look at smaller countries like Tanzania, you know what's trending already about the government of Tanzania are shutting down 5 of its hydro power plants, and the claim is that, well, they're having excess, electricity, so they had to shut it down. Even though we're hearing that that may not be the case, but when you technically look at it, look at the smaller African countries we have, even the smaller countries along here in West Africa, they all seem to have overcome this challenge. So Nigeria is the only country that I know of that is consistently doing the wrong thing and expecting the right results.
No, it appears Ghana is having similar issues. Without mincing words, recently,
okay. Yeah.
I think they were actually having a meeting, at the parliament level or something, and the light went off. That was kind of like a national embarrassment for Ghana. But again, it all speaks to the fact that these issues are not just typical to Nigeria alone. That is not to say that
it just happened in Ghana, but in Nigeria it is the norm. This is the norm in Nigeria.
This is happening in other countries, but they are underreported.
Yeah, no, they're underreported, but when it comes to Nigeria, we are already used to not having light at all. So it's not like the situation in Ghana where everyone was surprised. What happened? The light has gone off. If the light goes off in Nigeria, we're not surprised.
Generator Republic.
Yes, of course. This is the only country I know of that you find a generator in almost every home. You don't find that in Ghana. You don't find that even in the smallest West African countries.
Well, let me ask you this. Entrusting the power sector in the hands of private players seems to be the bane of the power sector, right?
Yeah. So now, when we talk about entrusting it to private sector, this is what I personally recommend. I recommend microgrid. What is a microgrid? So when we're talking about a microgrid, for instance, if you take a local government area and you break that local government area into, let's say, 50 segments, what we can call geographical segmentation, and then each segment you fix a microgrid. And when we talk about microgrid, it could be as small as a 1.2 megawatts, it could be a 3.6 megawatts, it could be a 7 megawatts. Now, let me give you this analogy. Nigeria has been trying to generate 10,000 megawatts almost forever. But look at this scenario. If you bring in a 7 megawatts a power generating turbine, and you put 10 of that in a particular region, you're actually generating 70 megawatts. If you put 100 of that, you are having a combined generation of 700 megawatts. Then talk about if you have 1,000 of that. So I think the way to go is to bring it to its smallest units, which is the microgrid. When we look at all the estates being built in most of the big cities in the in the country, like Abuja and so on, they're just thinking about estate. They are not creating facilities for microgrid.
But that is the new ritual on ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you into? Are you even thinking towards that direction yet?
Of
delving into real estate.
Well, real estate without power generation is a disaster.
Okay.
You go to all of the estates, as beautiful as the estates, there's noise pollution everywhere. Apart from the sound pollution, the hazard it gives to the to the environment when it comes to breathing in and breathing out.
But let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I'd like to link this question now to what I asked you earlier. You know, in terms of getting enough, money to set up, or to be ready really to generate and also distribute power at the state level. You talked about micro grid, right?
Yeah.
How expensive is that?
It's a lot cheaper.
And how many states can actually afford these?
Every state can afford it. Now, we're not saying that the state governments should begin to run microgrids. What I am advocating is for the state governments to give licenses to people who want to run microgrids, even if all they can generate is 1.2 megawatts. If all you can do is 1.2 megawatts, if you have a 1.2 megawatts power generating plant, you're limited to just a small area.
Okay, so if you give licenses to like 50 people, for example, in a particular location,
area,
will that not bring about clash of interest at the end of the day?
No, you have actually solved the problem. Why have you solved the problem? Because you have 50 people. And look at it. If each of this, let's go to the smallest you can get. If you have 50 microgrid stations giving you just 1.2 megawatts of electricity, imagine what you have solved. Imagine how many megawatts you've been able to give. And I'm not just talking about microgrids. For microgrids, we should have mini grids. So if you have, for instance, about 3 people giving you, or 5 people giving you about 1.2 megawatts, and then they are backed up by a mini grid giving, let's say, about 7 megawatts or 7.5 megawatts. So when these microgrid stations run into problems, they have a backup from the mini grid. And what you already have right now, which we often refer to as the national grid, now becomes a default setting. This is the way to go if we need 24 hours light. In each small area, let's say 1, 2, or 3 estates, let there be a microgrid supplying electricity to that very small unit.
As opposed to relying on the national grid.
On the national grid. Okay. So now that keeps the national grid as a backup, or what I will want to refer to as a default setting. So when there is light in the national grid, the microgrids and the mini grids shut down. So anytime you now have a challenge with those big giant mega grids, then the microgrids start, take over. Let's not forget, I said this in the last interview, that in times of war, your energy systems are legitimate targets. So it is time we begin to look at an integrated system. Look at the war between Russia and Ukraine. With everything Russia has been doing, it's still difficult for them to throw the entire country into darkness, because they have a lot of microgrids, mini grids scattered all over the place. So you blow up this power plant, there is a backup. We don't have that backup. So what we have now is what I want to call the default setting.
Well,
we need to now start creating micro power plants. If the micro power plant is going to take care of only 10 streets, that's good enough.
Okay.
So we know that no matter what happens to the national grid, there is a stopgap solution that can handle these 10 streets. And if you put a microgrid to just take care of, let's say, 5 or 10 streets, it means everyone using a generator in those streets no longer will need the generators, because the microgrids are just like generators.
So
light goes off and they take over.
Now, unbundling the power sector, does that actually, is that a pointer to the fact that the issues that have to do with epileptic power supply in the country will soon be a thing of the past?
Well,
or there are other issues that we must consider.
Well, when we've unbundled it, a very good policy. Now, the problem is not with the policy. Every government comes up with fantastic policy. It's with implementation. Right now, the burden is upon the state governors. So any state governor that can't provide electricity for its own state. So now the citizens will know, hold your state governors responsible.
That was why I actually asked you this, a similar question earlier, because you have states that are, they're even finding it difficult to pay salaries, right? So how are they going to cope with this added responsibility?
What we're saying
is a tall order at the end of the day.
No, we're not saying when you hand over the responsibility to the state governors, then the state governors now begin to build independent power plants.
You did say that you could also give license or license.
That's what we're talking about.
So how many people actually have the wherewithal to generate and also distribute power at the state level?
A lot. Now let me break this down. If you get, let's say, owners of 3 or 4 fuel stations, and the owners of 3 or 4 fuel stations come together, put their resource together, and say, let us put a 3.6 megawatts capacity here, and because we're into oil and gas, we should be able to provide diesel if it's a diesel generator. We should be able to provide gas if it's a gas generator. Then the governor has solved that problem, because you're now using people within who are already in the energy sector. So the problem we have here is that we keep talking about energy. We don't have an industry. When you talk about computer, there's a computer village. GSM, there's a GSM village. When it comes to energy, where's the energy village we have? So if you want to provide electricity, the first thing you start doing now is how you have to go to China. And when you think about the time it's going to take you to import, the equipment and all of this, before you even begin the project, the 4th-year tenure of the governor is gone. So the way to go is give small licenses. Right. Let's stop trying to generate a huge capacity. Let's stop talking about 50, 100, 200, 500 megawatts. No, break it down. Let's come to as small as 1.2 megawatts. Now, if you give someone a contract to generate a 1.2 megawatts, it's just like buying a generator. It's very easy to do. If you give contracts to someone for 3.6 megawatts, I can fix a 3.6 megawatts capacity in less than 3 or 4 months and begin to provide 24 hours electricity. So if you have people like me now who, if I say I can fix 3.6 megawatts in 4 months, and you have 50 people like me, which means you have 50 people giving out electricity within 4 months. And then the problem is solved. Remember, when we talk about microgrid, we don't take anything away from what we already have. Right. It's an addition. So the microgrids are like standby generators. Right. So the gap we have in between when these giant grids collapse, once in a while, what we now we're so used to calling it epileptic, power supply. That's it. Well, that's the epilepsy the microgrid will stop, because anytime the major grid have an epilepsy, then the microgrids take over. The same thing you do with your private generators. That's what the microgrid is.
All right. Well, our fingers are crossed. Let's see, the changes this will actually bring about. But it's good to be optimistic. I mean, we're all, joining our faith with that of the president.
Implementation. The only thing the president can do is policy. It's just a policy maker. So when it comes to implementation, that's where the challenge will really be.
Well, we just hope that the relevant stakeholders would actually, take your words for it and perhaps go back to the drawing board and see how they can re-strategize, because indeed, without the power sector, the economy will not grow. I mean, that is just the reality we just have to deal with as a nation. But Dr. Peter Piper is an energy consultant. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
And for you viewers, you can also share your thought with us on what we just discussed as to what you make of the moves by the federal and state government to unbundle the power sector. If at all anything will change. I am Omoife Peace Osemere. I'll be back in a moment with the news update. Good afternoon.